Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Walks on Wall Street. Hopefully you all are having an amazing day. It is Tuesday, March 7th, 2023, and today was a pretty significant day and an important day on Wall Street. I'm sure everybody took a couple minutes out of their day to, at least maybe if you didn't watch it live, you probably caught some of the recap and some of the highlights on YouTube or CNBC and the like. Now, Fed Chair Jerome Powell came out very conclusively saying that we're probably going to have rates higher for a lot longer. And what I think about this is that if you try to interpret what the Fed is trying to do, I don't think it's the spin that we saw a lot of the, I should say our politicians, right? They're trying to say that Fed Chair Jerome Powell is trying to throw people out of work. They're trying to kill the economy. I really don't think the Fed is trying to do that. I don't think the Fed is this big bad evil entity. Although I guess you could argue that. I really just think that they're trying to get inflation back down to that 2% target, and that means taking drastic measures, and that means leaving interest rates higher for a lot longer. Now, if we do a quick review and we think about where the Fed funds target rate is today, we're right in the range of, 4.5% to 4.75, so 4 3/4. Think all the way back to December, so only a couple months ago here now. The Federal Reserve, which specifically Fed Chair Jerome Powell, he said that in order for inflation to come back down to that 2% target, they're looking at a Fed funds rate of about 5 to 5.5%. Well, after today, I think that's probably going to change in a big way. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Fed funds target range of around 6 to 6.5% as opposed to the 5.5 that was previously expected. Now, we're going to go into why today on the stream, but think back to the last non-farm payroll report, because this Friday we are going to hear from the non-farm payrolls again. Last non-farm payroll report came in extremely hot, well above expectations. I think there was over 500,000, 500,000 jobs created in the economy, and the unemployment rate actually went down. So the unemployment rate in the United States right now, I think, is 4.3%. If you think about what a lot of the other Fed presidents have been saying, such as Fed President John Williams, he really wants to see the unemployment rate in the range of 5% in order to even think about cutting interest rates. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. We're going to talk about that tonight. Markets really didn't like that. Markets were pretty rattled by it. But I'm actually kind of surprised because, I mean, if you've been watching the stream, if you've been watching Walks on Wall Street, this has been very well telegraphed by the Fed, right? And I think everybody, well, not everybody, but the majority of people who watch the stream, we've been covering this, right? The Fed is probably going to keep rates higher for much longer. And it seems like a lot of other market participants still have this hopeful and wishful thinking that we could potentially have some sort of impromptu pivot, but we'll see here. All right, guys, let's see who we have in the chat. I see Ryan Beck is here. Good to see you, my friend. I see Dallas. I see Valenti. Good to see you, Mustafa. Welcome, my friend. British Gray. Austin City Limits. I see Gregory. Cosmo Scary is here. Good to see you, Cosmo. We are streaming live outside of the 200 Southeast Financial Center tonight. Now, we do have a little, say big news, but I was watching an interview with Citadel Securities' Ken Griffin. And we have the Metro Mover going by here. But with all of this talk about Chat GPT, right, it is a very known Ken Griffin as he was talking about Chat GPT, and he actually announced that Citadel, both the hedge fund and the market making division, is in talks with Chat GPT on negotiating an enterprise scale license. That's probably going to be big money. I would assume that contract is probably going to be in the millions of dollars per year. So definitely one to watch. Now, Citadel Securities is located on the 20th floor of this building. They have taken over almost half of the entire WeWork building, and this is only the temporary office. They are going to be moving into their megatall tower in Brickell, which we are all excited about. Hopefully that will break ground soon. Cosmos says, Tom, do you use ChatGPT for anything? I really don't. I've tried it out. Now, here's where I think I could implement it. I think it would probably be good for writing generic scripts if you're in sales, or if you're in the business of sending out contracts. Let's say if you're in real estate or something like that. I think it could automate a lot of those processes. I'm sort of on the fence about the whole thing. Now, I do want to be conclusive here and say that I am a huge believer in technology, and I don't think the government should do anything to try to stifle innovation at all. And the reason why I bring that up is because as you talk about, autonomous driving, right? Just is an example. Governmental agencies and even folks in Congress have been very vocal against new technologies that may displace a lot of workers. But if you look throughout history, right? Yes, technology is a huge disruptor and it displaces a lot of workers, but at the same time, it creates new jobs. If you look at technology in and of itself, for every one job it destroys, it probably is going to create 2 or 3 additional jobs. So, a lot of people say that, we should ban ChatGPT in schools, we should ban it in colleges. I think that's the wrong play. I think that's really the wrong way to think about it, because at the end of the day, students, and I should just say people in general, are going to use all the tools at their disposal. And to try to stifle that, I think is the wrong approach. I think we should embrace it, even if it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable at first. But I don't know, that's just my thoughts. What about you guys? If you look all the way over here, you could see Brickell Key. We may just have enough time to walk to Brickell Key today. Cosmo Scary says, I agree. Good to see you, Cosmo. Ryan Beck says, I'm glad. I'm in the people business. AI will never duplicate interaction or human interaction. That's actually a really good thought, and it's true. I think I told you guys this story before. So there's a really good book called AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. And Kai-Fu Lee used to be the president of Google China during the tech and telecom boom, but now he's retired, very, very successful investor, and he actually runs a VC firm based out of California called Sinovation Ventures, which only specializes in Chinese tech companies. And in the book, Kai-Fu Lee gave this really interesting example of a particular, I think it was a remote patient monitoring device, or like I think it was something like that. It may have been an RPM device, it may have been something else. And the only interaction that the humans use the device for is to call the 1-800 number on the back, not to troubleshoot the device, but just to talk to somebody, right? Because seniors tend to get very, very lonely. So it's a really good point. I think the only thing that AI and robotics could never replace is just basic human interaction, right? And I think that's why home healthcare is very, very important. But, the story was really interesting. If you guys ever want to read a good book, check out AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. The only reason why the seniors were using the device to call the 1-800 number was to talk to a living, breathing human being, which is kind of crazy to think about. Here we are outside of Novico. Hey, Evan Weeks says, Tom, as useful a tool as ChatGPT and OpenAI is, it's still a tool that will require human operators and interpreters. It's interesting to me since ChatGPT went live, it's gotten worse at programming. Yeah, so I guess it also has its own biases to it as well, right? Because if you think about AI, you train these algorithms, you train this AI to sort of spit out the output, right? I guess the theory is over time, AI will start to learn and improve and get better on its own. But, that's why we've seen a lot of these articles come out said, oh, the AI is biased. If you have it write an article about President Biden, it would say one thing. If you have it write, a description about President Trump, it would say another thing. So, I think it's still in its early stages, but I think this is going to be very, very big over the next coming decade. And I think the United States, it's hard to say because the United States, this is the Aston Martin building, by the way. The United States could make a very big error here by stifling the innovation and almost deterring it, all the while China is embracing this type of technology. So I think we need to be very careful with it, and I think we need to put different decision makers in place. I think in the age of AI, machine learning, I think we need different decision makers as it relates to Congress and things like that. But we'll see. Now here is the W Hotel and Tower right across the street. Really, really beautiful tonight. Let me try to catch up on the chat. I forgot to put the chat on slow-mo, so I'm getting a little bit distracted. It's going a mile a minute. Hey, Laura M says, hey Tom, watching from North Carolina, 75 and sunny today. Love that. It was gorgeous here today too. It was really, really nice. 61 says, hello Tom, they started doing today soil testing at the site where the super tall will be for Citadel's tower. That is awesome. I'm excited about that. I think I told you guys, I'm really, really excited to see the transformation of Miami's skyline. It's just going to be amazing. A lot of people are moving down here, a lot of investment is coming down here, so I am extremely, extremely excited. Paul says, Tom, how fast do you see AI technology progressing, say over the next decade or so? Well, if you look at any type of technology adoption cycle, I always like to give this example because we do the live stream. Check out the moon over Miami. I think it's a full moon tonight. Now, think about the live streaming capabilities we have to do the stream today. This is only possible because of 4G networks, if you really think about it. So back in the day when we had 3G networks, yeah, you could go on the internet, but the latency requirements just wouldn't cut it for live streaming. So if you really think about it, these type of live streams were really only possible from 2013 on. Really, really good, streaming in 1080p. That's not that long ago. So if you think about the adoption curves and the acceleration of the use of technology, it's almost like a hockey stick runaway chart. They have these exponential growth trends, especially social networks. If you think about the growth of Facebook, if you think about the growth of Instagram, which is another Facebook company, or I should say Meta company, they have these very exponential, explosive, almost like Metcalfe's law growth trends. And I think if you have an AI product or an AI tool that continuously gets better with the more data it's fed, it's almost exponential, the growth, right? Because AI will continue to get smarter, will continue to learn the more data that it's fed or that it's being processed. So I think we're going to be surprised. That would be my prediction. I think we're going to be really, really surprised with how things look in just the next 10 years. Looks like they're doing some sort of construction work here. I'll give you guys a shot of the Aston Martin building right here. Tickler says, do I think ELF will hit $200? I have no idea, to be quite honest. Memo says, hey Tom, did you get to see the Tesla Investor Day? I didn't. I read a little bit about it. I've been so busy over the past week. I haven't been able to sort of keep up to date on all the little intricacies. But from what I heard, it was a little bit disappointing. I have a couple friends who are just ridiculous, I would say, Tesla heads. and they said it was quite disappointing, the investor day. Hey, Robert says, I think AI is the future, VR not so much. Uh, 407 says, new technology always follows the hype cycle. Terry P says, hello, Tom and everybody, good to see you. Brad's Brain, welcome, welcome. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have been saying, you know, is AI just the next hype? It kind of feels a little bit, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar. I think this may have been 2018 to 2019. Does anybody remember the crazy mania? I would call it a mania as it relates to the marijuana and weed stocks. Does anybody remember that? Everybody and their brother, that's all you would see on CNBC, is just talking about these marijuana penny stocks. And it was a huge hype cycle. All of these stocks went from like $1 to $200 and then back to zero. Many of them went out of business. And I don't think it's as egregious as that, because I think there's real use case here and there's actual revenue. But to the user's point that just made that comment, you know, technology always follows a big hype cycle, I would agree. With any new emerging technology that's interesting, you have this huge explosion of interest, right? Everybody wants to jump on board. It's sort of like Bitcoin in 2017, if you guys remember that. Like, every time you turn on the mainstream channels, even the local news, they were talking about Bitcoin in 2017. Then it implodes. And then you have a normal adoption trend where the vast majority of people miss the trend. So I actually think that's a pretty good comment. Evan Weeks says it's not human intelligence, but sure as hell, it's a powerful tool for many different purposes. Now, has anybody in the chat, and I'm missing a lot of the comments here, but has anybody in the chat used ChatGPT on a regular basis, and would you say it improves? What was that? And would you say it materially has improved your life? Because you guys got to see the interview. If you just Google Ken Griffin, Bloomberg ChatGPT, Ken Griffin is a smart guy, okay? He started Citadel out of his dormitory at Harvard. He's a very smart guy, one of the richest men on earth. And right now, he is in process, right? He just announced it, that they are negotiating an enterprise license for ChatGPT. And that's probably gonna run them well over, I mean, it's gonna be in the millions of dollars if I had to guess, just from my experience selling software and selling telecom. It's probably gonna be pretty pricey. And if you have companies like that that are interested. Now, some of the use cases for Citadel, you know, it'll probably help a lot of the developers in translating code, right? Or just rewriting code, or just writing code in and of itself, right? So you don't have to have as many software engineers. But I don't know. Evan Weeks' ChatGPT is rapidly becoming a core part of code review process on my team, says Evan Weeks. How much is a license of ChatGPT? Now, I'm obviously assuming there's a free version, right? Like a standard license, but let's say an enterprise grade license for like an SMB sized team. Does anybody know how much that would be? Like what, $75 a seat? Hey boss says I don't like it. Hey Trader says I used to work from time to time. Didn't drastically change much, but it does help. Interesting. Key says we are a technological civilization. There will be no going back. I agree. Agree 100%. Now this is the Epic Hotel and Residences. It's a little bit quiet here, but it is a Tuesday night. Nice night, by the way. Dusty Cole is here, says, hey Tom, good to see you, Dusty. Thank you so much for being here. Sunshine After Rain, Bree Grams says, I know someone using it to help with work reports, and he says it's very useful. Jackie says, I use it every day as a software engineer. Fantastic. Yeah, I think just maybe in my line of work, guys. I mean, you know me, I'm in tech sales, right? Or used to be anyway. I just don't think that I would have any applicable use cases for me, but I do want to experiment with it for script writing and things like that, and maybe, you know, solicitation. Now this yacht is insane. Now we just, I think we just had Yacht Week here in Miami. I think it just passed. I think it was 2 weekends ago or something like that. There was a ton of people from all over the world down here. It was really, really cool. But this building right here, Aston Martin Residences, they're actually going to extend the Miami Riverwalk, and this will be open to the public. Finally, this has been closed down for quite some time. But the docks, there's going to be at least 3 to 4 docks that some of the private residences could actually utilize. So if you don't feel like driving up to your apartment, you could always just take your boat, park right here, and then go right up into your residences, which is pretty interesting. Hey, Lizzie's here. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Dan Zhang says, Tom, do you think AI could replace some sales jobs like an insurance agent? Well, I think the insurance industry, right, if you're thinking about, well, the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. If you think about an insurance agent, it depends on what kind of insurance, but let's say homeowners insurance, right? You would shop the different prices. I guess an algorithm could automatically bounce between different agencies and just spit you back out the price, right? I think there's insurance agents and insurance brokers that do that manually, but there's no reason why an algorithm couldn't do that for you. Here's what I would say is the sales industry that is going to be, now I don't want to say this because this is sort of famous last words, but will be sort of isolated from the AI disruption. And that is more along the lines of enterprise grade sales. I think the smaller transactional sales that have shorter sales cycles will definitely be probably replicated away, right, by different sort of technologies. But if you're selling a very large enterprise software to a very big company, it is a very, very complex sale, right? That could take a year or multiple years to sell. You know, there's different integrations between teams. You have to get multiple approvals from different people in different industries. So I think that is going to be a little bit more difficult for disruption, I guess. But, you know, let's say like a McDonald's, right? If you're a cashier at McDonald's, that's technically a sales job, right? You're selling people hamburgers and things like that. All of that is going to be completely automated away. It already is. Every time I walk into a McDonald's here in Miami or in New York City, you have those kiosks, you know, those automatic ordering kiosks. So I think the more mundane the task, the easier it will be to automate that away, right? And again, that is a very simple transaction. I want, you know, a burger, fries, and a Coke. Very simple transaction. You can have a machine do that, totally automated away, and it already is being automated away. But if you're selling, you know, Boeing a CRM solution, right? You can't really just have, you know, no sales guy or sales girl on that job. It's very difficult. And you could take that and push it towards anything else, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a CRM software. It could be literally anything. So I don't know, that's what I would say. Kets42 says those kiosks are great. Peter says, how will AI help the change? I don't know what you mean. Ratfink says innovation has always been the United States' strength. I agree with that. And that is, you know, not to sort of hammer on this whole AI and technological revolution for too long, but I think it is important. That is where I get a little bit nervous when it relates to our congressmen and congresswomen, right? On both the right and the left. You know, and I don't want to be an ageist, right? I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but I just don't think they get it. And I believe that we need to I think we need to change the system to put more educated people right, that have either worked at these tech companies before, who are software engineers, who understand the technology, in the positions of power to make those decisions. Because what you don't want to do is stifle that innovation so you could save, a truck driver's job for the next 12 years, right? That's not what you want to do. And this is actually where I agree with Andrew Yang, where he says you never want to stifle the innovation. What you want to do is you want to identify the pockets in the economy that are most prone for disruption, and then you want to invest in those individuals who unfortunately hold those jobs for retooling, retraining, and re-educating them for a new and empowered workforce, right? So if we think that autonomous driving is going to unfortunately disrupt a lot of hardworking truck drivers, what we don't want to do is say, okay, let's put policies in place where you can't do any autonomous driving research, you can't invest in these autonomous driving vehicles. That's not what you want to do. What you want to do is be honest about it and maybe invest in those people who unfortunately have those jobs to retool and retrain them so they just don't go out of work and they have no work, right? I think it's all about re-educating, retooling, and retraining, but that is not going to get you elected, unfortunately. What will get you elected is just telling people what they want to hear. Now, this is a gorgeous view. If you look directly ahead but to the left, this is going to be Brickell, or the main downtown Brickell. I think we may walk over this bridge, though. We always walk over the other one. Hey, Joe says, love to see you back in Miami. Good to see you. Joe Flatsmack is here. Yeah, Mike C says, can we elect a Chat GPT congressman? Hilarious. Chris Beeman is here. Good to see you, Chris. Welcome. Austin Hunter is his first time in the live. My buddy watches regularly. I think you are dialed in and a sharp dude. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you so much, my friend Austin. There was a huge fish that just jumped out of the water here. Dang it, I didn't show you guys that. Maybe it'll jump out again, but that was a huge, oh, look at them. There they are. You guys see them? Maybe it's too dark, you can't see them. I wish I had my flashlight. Those things are massive. I don't know what they are. Oh, there he is. Now, in the winter, we usually see dolphins jumping in and out of the water, so maybe we'll see a couple tonight. I think that'd be cool. But, I mean, guys, the biggest story on Wall Street today, okay, is we heard from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, right? He testified before Congress. Now, I think a lot of our politicians were going a little bit hard on Jerome Powell, and I'm not trying to be a Fed apologist here. However, and this is why, I want to try to watch what I say here, but again, politicians are in the business of getting reelected, right? I just want to say that. They're in the business of getting reelected. They are not necessarily in the business of trying to do what's right for the country long term. And when you heard Elizabeth Warren today really tearing into Fed Chair Jerome Powell, I mean, saying, you're okay with putting 2 million people out of work, sort of calling Fed Chair Jerome Powell a sociopath inadvertently, saying, why are you okay with raising interest rates to the point where you put 2 million people out of work, right? But if you really, really think about it, okay, from anybody who understands the economy, understands inflation, what hurts the average working class American the most, by far, is inflation. We know that. Inflation is out of control. We know that, right? We're not trying to politicize it. I really don't think this inflation is Biden's fault. I don't think it's Trump's fault. We'll talk about, really what caused this inflation. But if you let inflation continue to run wild, and it runs at a 6 handle for the next 2 years, that is going to decimate people, okay? We already see the data that came out that shows that credit card debt and consumer debt blasted through another all-time record high. Again, people are accruing huge balances on their credit cards just to make ends meet. People are taking out additional mortgages and lines of credit on their homes so they could pay the bills, send their kids to college and the like, because they can't keep up with the cost of living. And wages are not keeping up with the cost of living and inflation. So what would you rather have? Unemployment being 3.4%, and we know those numbers are fake. Those aren't even real numbers. Oh, look at how big that dog is. It's almost like a horse. Now, unemployment is at 3.4%. If we want to get inflation down to 2%, Fed Chair Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve thinks that they can do that if they go to 6.5. Okay? If that means unemployment has to go to 4 or 5%, I think that's worth it over the long term. Because what you don't want is to have an environment where, a gallon of gas costs $5, right, in perpetuity forever, where you have runaway rent growth, where you have, a median single-family home costs almost $400,000, right? That automatically will guarantee the destruction and the decline of the middle class. The middle class has already been called out. So what I think is, we got to do what we need to do to get inflation under control, but the politicians are going to be relentless with beating up the Fed chair. And this would be the same exact way if a Republican was in office, because this goes back to my original statement when I say presidents tend to take too much credit when the stock market is doing well, and they tend to get too much punishment when the markets are not performing well, right? So for people who really understand how the financial system works, it's based on rates, right? We have a very managed market. So we are coming off about 14 years of ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, where we have held interest rates artificially low for so long. And it just so happened when President Barack Obama was in office, interest rates were zero. We printed a bunch of money. When President Donald Trump was in office, interest rates were extremely depressed and we printed a bunch of money. So equity valuations, real estate valuations went to the moon. Now that inflation actually started to pick up and inflation started to actually run away, the Federal Reserve had to make the tough decision to not only begin quantitative tightening by running off the balance sheet, so selling Treasury bonds. They're not yet selling mortgage-backed securities, but raising interest rates. And what do we know? That if you think about how stock valuations are priced, it's all about the present value of a company's future cash flows. Okay, that is what investing is about. What is the value of this company's future cash flows today? And when you have very, very low interest rates, the present value of a company's future cash flows are worth a lot more. However, when you raise rates, the present value of those future cash flows get eroded, right? Because rates are higher now. So this is why I still believe that no matter what political party is in office, nobody will ever be honest. The Democrats will never be honest. The Republicans will never be honest and say, look, we got to get this inflation under control. We got to crush it. And that means the value of your home is going to go down. The value of your equity portfolio is going to go down. But nobody would ever say that because that would be political suicide. Instead, we just want to bully the Fed chair into doing what we want. And Donald Trump did this. He did this to Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He actually threatened to fire the guy because Jerome Powell wanted to raise rates under the Trump administration, and Trump came out and said, if you do that, you're fired, which you're really not supposed to do. They're supposed to be independent entities. But I think Elizabeth Warren did the same thing today. She said, if you raise rates, and if you continue to do this, you're going to throw 2 million people out of work. And that is your fault. That's all on you. When that's only half the story, and I think that's a little bit disingenuous. Anyway, what do you guys think about that? Do you think I'm off base? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you disagree with what I'm saying? And how do you think we can get inflation under control? I don't know, those are just my thoughts. I'm the first person to criticize the Fed, but at the end of the day, when it's so blatantly political, I gotta call out both sides. Real quick, this is the City National Bank. This is Miami Tower. Really beautiful building. Wow, Wendy England says, Tom, gas is $7.24 a gallon here. Where is that? $7.24 a gallon? Oh my God, man. Hey, 407 says, totally agree. The LT Prod says, Ken Griffin said the Fed is in uncharted territory. I would agree, but I think the Fed is always in uncharted territory. Ever since the great financial crisis, the Federal Reserve has always been in uncharted waters. Jack S. says, I agree. Powell really holds his tongue during his testimony. Warren deserved to be told off today. Yeah, I agree. And again, I don't want to make this seem like I'm only coming after the Democrats, right? Because I am conservative in nature. You guys know that. But I like to call it both ways. I think I'm fair. I was very outspoken when Trump did the same thing, when Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, look, you know, we got to put the brakes on the economy. Trump freaking threatened to fire the guy, right? So with modern monetary theory, unfortunately, it's all political. And depending on who's in office, they are going to put ridiculous pressure on the Fed to ease monetary policy so the stock market goes up, so property values go up, so everybody has the appearance that everything is all rosy so they can just point to the scoreboard. So, hey, Ren 1018, good to see you. Hey, Beautiful Strangers is when a company is privately held, how does one determine the cash flow of the firm? Well, the same way. Do you mean like a private entity? Like, let's say if I have a small business, how would I determine what my cash flow is going to be? Is that your question? Hey, Ralph is here. Says, hey, Tom, beautiful city and hope to visit one day. Dude, please. Miami has a lot to offer. I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. And please, you're more than welcome to come visit us. We'd love to have you. This is the Riverwalk, but from above. Really clean, really gorgeous here. Al Baker says, need to stop government spending. That's how you stop inflation. That is true, Al, but in my opinion, that's not realistic because that'll just never happen. Unfortunately, we spend like drunken sailors. Hey, the LT Prods is Demodoran said on CNBC. He said inflation is driving the market, not the Fed. Well, I guess causation, correlation. Oh, I think the bridge is going to go up here, guys. Maybe we'll see a crazy boat or a crazy yacht coming across here. At the time, government spending is way too much. Barbara says we need to be retraining workers and getting ready to provide unemployment benefits during the transition to a post-inflation economy. Hollywood Bob says, Tom, Bloomberg reports WeWork in talks with Yardi Systems in California to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to restructure their debt. I mean, the WeWork thing is just really a disaster. And funny enough, we tend to talk about WeWork quite often. Oh, guys, look at all these fish in the water here. I don't know if you guys could see that. You see them? Look right here. You'll see them all. I wonder what they're called. Maybe bluefish, something like that. Apologize if I can't read everybody's comments. I forgot to put on slow mode in the chat, so it's almost unreadable. I do apologize. Dan Zhang says, Tom, do you think it's kind of... Oh, do you think this kind of testify in front of the Congress is nothing but an opportunity for the politicians to pretend they care by asking a lot of useless questions? I think yes and no. I think a lot of the politicians are obviously going for sound bites. On both sides, by the way, both Republicans and Democrats. Right? If they can grill the Fed chair and make him look like a goof, you know, they could post it on their Twitter page. Wow, look at this boat going by. That is crazy. Now, it didn't seem like it was that tall for the bridge to go up, though. Maybe there's another one coming on the other side? I mean, that's my biggest question, my biggest fear for America, right? Is that I think the incentivization structure in politics is broken, right? Because when you tell people the truth, especially as it relates to this inflation situation, people are not going to like the answer, but the answer that they don't want to hear is the correct answer. So you can paint out the Fed chair to be the bad guy, but at the end of the day, Fed Chair Jerome Powell isn't the one who told the government to spend all this money, right? The Federal Reserve is a separate private entity. I think a lot of people, don't understand that. Even though the name is Federal Reserve, it has nothing to do with the government. It is a private business. It is a private entity. So they are not in charge of fiscal policy, right? There is monetary policy and there's a fiscal side of the house. And for the politicians, both on the right and the left, I'm not just trying to call out one political party, to bastardize the Fed for all of the problems of America, I think is a little bit disingenuous. There is a whole fiscal side of the house that the Fed has nothing to do with. Yeah, Zach Drew says debt is outpacing inflation. Soon it will, and that is a big problem. Hey, Blues Writer, what's up? Says I once got a haircut from a guy named Slow-Mo. Not surprising, it took really hilarious. Hey, Action Kid, what's up, man? Says there's still the issue of the debt ceiling that hasn't been talked about recently. The government can't spend, the debt limit isn't raised. So this is, I really think this is a non-issue in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is because this happens, it's like if you've been really paying attention to the news and you read Wall Street Journal, you read Barron's Investors Business Daily for at least 5+ years, you'll notice the same narratives, the same news cycle. They're not going to raise the debt ceiling, they're going to hold people hostage, and the government's going to shut down, and they pull on people's heartstrings and say people aren't going to get paid, the police officers aren't going to get paid, and things like that. But they always raise it. They always raise it. So I think they are going to raise it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, what do you guys think? But I think without a doubt, they are going to raise the debt ceiling, and we're going to continue to spend more. Because if you really think about the system we're in, I want to show you guys the fish one more time. Hold on. You guys see them cruising around down there? If you think about the system that we're in, and I forgot who pointed it out in the chat, but it was the quote that the Citadel Securities' Ken Griffin said. And he said the Federal Reserve is in uncharted territory or uncharted waters. Now, what he means by that is this situation of artificially suppressed interest rates. So in order to get us out of the financial crisis, we needed to implement quantitative easing, right, or QE. And that is, in my view, just kicking the can down the road, right? Just providing liquidity, making sure the financial system runs good, incentivizing people to take on risk by lowering rates and keeping them suppressed for too long. But how do you unwind that, right? That is the uncharted territory. That is the narrative, that is the unknown. How do we come off of quantitative easing for 14 years and go back to normal? Here's another thing I'd say. I saw an interesting tweet today. I think it was probably one of the best tweets I've ever seen in a while, because it was very thought-provoking. And he's totally spot on, by the way. I forget who tweeted it, but I retweeted it. Anyway, the tweet was that many people in today's economy think that we are going from normal to abnormal. But in reality, we are actually going back to normal from abnormal, right? What was not normal is to leave interest rates low for 14 years, is to balloon the Fed balance sheet into the trillions of dollars by continuously buying mortgage-backed securities and buying US Treasuries to suppress yields. That is not normal, right? So what we're actually doing now with QT is starting to go back to normal. And the reason why I think a lot of market participants think that it's not normal is because there's a lot of younger and newer investors, such as myself, right? I'm 27 years old, that really haven't studied history very well, right? This is an experiment, the whole thing that's going on right now with QE in perpetuity. It's an experiment. The Japanese are doing the same thing. If you think about the Bank of Japan, we're actually going to hear from them on Friday, I think. The Bank of Japan is going to announce their newest monetary policy decision. And in Japan, they have negative interest rates, right? So, look, I don't know how this is all going to unfold, but if history has taught us anything, I think a lot of people underestimate just how long the Fed can maintain this balancing act. So I don't know. Rat thinks his quantitative easing was definitely not a good plan. TC says, I remember when politicians didn't want to publicize a QE2. Scary how times have changed. Yeah, we're into like QE infinity now. Like, it's really wild. It's really, really wild. Yeah, Matthew M says again, yes, artificial. Mike C says, even though it's not keeping up with inflation, it feels nice to get real money on a savings account. Mike C has the comment of the night so far. Really quick, this is the Icon Brickle, everybody. I personally do like the Icon Brickle a lot. The security guards need a little bit of improvement, but I do like the Icon Brickle. Gorgeous views from the apartments, as you could imagine. But let's quickly think about what Mike T just said, because I wrote down in the show notes tonight, TINA. I wrote down that acronym, TINA. And TINA stands for There Is No Alternative. Now, this has been an acronym on Wall Street for many, many years, but it really came to popularity after the Great Financial Crisis. So if you think about the term in and of itself, its bond yields are so low that if I buy a bond, I will literally be forced to lose money in terms of real rates. But right now, if you look at the 1-year Treasury yield, right, or the 1-year US Treasury, it's yielding over 5%. Well, that seems like a little bit of an alternative to me. If you look at the yield on the S&P 500, it's like 1.78%, and then you have all this volatility risk. So now there is actually an alternative to equities. So the term TINA was, okay, I can't buy a bond because in terms of real rate of return, remember, a real rate of return is your rate of return minus inflation, right? Has always been negative. You know, the vast majority of bonds or the vast majority of debt in the world has been negative yielding for years, right? Still to this day in Japan and many other countries. But now, Treasury yields are actually pretty attractive. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. You know, take a look at the yield curve. If you go to cnbc.com /bonds, okay? cnbc.com /bonds, scroll down. So here's what you'll see. You'll see treasuries, you'll see gilts. You'll see US treasuries, then you'll see gilts. But look at the 10 and the 2. And this is the main spread for the yield curve, right? You'll see all the bond yields, you'll see the yield curve in real time. Take a look at the 10-year US Treasury yield and take a look at the 2-year US Treasury yield. And you'll notice something quite shocking. You'll notice that the 10-year is right at 3.9%, so 3.9 and some change. And you'll notice that the 2-year is about 100 basis points above the 10-year. I think that is a historic spread that we haven't seen ever. That is the deepest yield curve inversion we've had, I think, in history, if I'm not mistaken. So the 2-year is now at 5.036%, and the 10-year is at 3.983%. So if I'm an investor, right, And I'm so sick of all the volatility in the stock market. I'm looking at corporate earnings that came out. We're almost 90% of the way through earnings season. Earnings were meh. Some companies did good, some companies did bad. But I think the big theme for this earnings season was margin compression. If I don't want to deal with any of that, why don't I just buy some treasuries and make a guaranteed risk-free rate of return of 5% on a one-year US Treasury note? That seems like an alternative to me, especially if you want to decrease volatility in your portfolio. Oh, NG, thank you so much for your very kind donation. Let me see, sorry about that. I have the chat. I forgot to put slow-mo on the chat, I do apologize. But NG, thank you so much. Very kind of you, and I appreciate you very, very much. Joe says, why is there so much? Well, I think over here, right on the corner of Brickell Avenue and Southeast 8th Street, this is the construction site of One Brickell City Center. Now, I think they have the demolition permits, so they're going to demo all of the palm trees and this building in white here, and they are going to build a crazy, crazy super tall. I think this is going to be the tallest office tower in all of Brickell, in all of Miami. Hey, EM is here. Says Miami is supposed to grow a lot over the next several years. Miami World Center looks pretty interesting. I guess it's halfway done already. Now, does anybody have an update on Bayfront, or what is it called? I forget what the construction site is called. Bayfront Plaza, One Bayfront Plaza. I don't think they have the permits yet for demolition, but hey, Steve CR, good to see you, my friend. Welcome. Action Kids says people don't want to risk lending to the US government for 30 years. Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about the yield curve, to AK's point, now, US Treasuries are considered risk-free, right? Because the US has never defaulted on its debt obligations, right? So obviously it's not 100% risk-free, but it's considered risk-free because the US has never defaulted on its debt obligations. But if you really think about how to interpret a yield curve, it's when a yield curve becomes inverted, it is because money managers are willing to sell shorter term dated bonds to buy the long end of the curve, right? Like the 30-year Treasury. And that suppresses yields on the longer end of the curve, right? Because you have to understand the correlation between bonds and yields, and there's an inverse correlation there. So just think about yourself. Like, imagine if you're a portfolio manager, you're running 100 million, okay? And you think that the economy is going to take a turn for the worse. You think that corporate profit margins are going to compress. You think that corporate earnings are going to decline. You think we're going to go into an earnings recession. Well, then, yeah, you're not going to buy stocks. You would feel more than comfortable to lock up your money for 30 years, right? A 30-year bill, and let it sit there because you think the economy is going to take a huge turn for the worse, right? So you're buying the long end of the curve. But as you're buying the long end of the curve and locking up your money, well, that suppresses yields. And as you're selling the short end of the curve, right, yields naturally go up. And this is what you call an inverted yield curve. So it's so important, and I actually I have an Excel model that I use, and maybe I'll share that template model with all of you in the Discord or somewhere. But it's so important, okay, not to just look at the yield curve and say, oh, it's inverted, that's bad, right? Because you need to understand where the yield curve is today, where the yield curve came from, and where it is going, right? So you could have a normal yield curve, okay, which is called a steep yield curve. And you could look at that at face value and you could say, wow, everything is great. I'm going to go invest in stocks. But if you've tracked the yield curve and it's slow, a wide curve to a narrow curve, right? You would say, okay, something is going on. People are becoming very pessimistic on the economy because the curve is narrowing, right? And then oftentimes when the yield curve is inverted, it's too late to sort of position your portfolio appropriately because the move is already done. So what I'm looking for now is for the yield curve to start to flatten out again. Unfortunately, that is not happening yet. You know, we have the most aggressive inversion of the 10 and the 2s in history of about 100 basis points. But if you really want to understand how to interpret a yield curve, that is how you interpret it. That is how I would interpret it. This is Brickell City Center. Now, I don't think we're allowed to film inside, so we may just walk around the outside, but who knows. Black Beauty Time Machines is I just need Bitcoin for this next bull run, and then I don't care what happens. Just get me over the hump. Interesting. Freezer is here, says hello. Good to see you, Freezer. Welcome. Daryl is here, says good evening, Tom, from Illinois. Welcome, Daryl. Hollywood Bob says default won't happen because the government won't be able to pay their debts, which means the dollar is done and we'll all pay the price, in my opinion. So I actually disagree with that. I think that the dollar is going to continue to remain very, very strong. Speaking of the dollar, did anybody notice, did anybody pay very close attention to what happened with the dollar today? I won't tell you guys, but did anybody notice during Powell's testimony, and that is very telling because this can actually debunk a false narrative in the market that we've been covering here on the stream for a long time. Hey, Ryan Beck says, Tom, so do you think we'll revisit the October lows? Well, I think it's more likely that the market will probably be flat to down over the next year, especially if we get a 50 basis point rate hike on March 15th. Now, did anybody also notice the futures market? So to Ryan Beck's point, do we think the stock market is going to go higher, lower, or stay flat? Well, up until today, right around 3 o'clock, the futures market was only pricing in about a 25% likelihood that we will get a 50 basis point rate hike at the next FOMC meeting. Well, once Jerome Powell started his testimony today, that went up to over 50%. Did anybody see that? I was watching that in real time. So now it's a 50 that the Fed will actually raise by 50 basis points in a week here, right? The next FOMC meeting is what, the 14th to the 15th, or the 15th to the 16th? So if they do that, Fed funds is 5%. We have a 5 handle on the Fed funds rate, which means the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield is probably going to live above 4% for quite a while. And I think that's going to continue to put pressure on stocks. I don't know, what do you guys think? Bree Graham says, Tom, focus on staying employed, putting some cash away, and invest some if you can. I agree with that. I think that's very sound reasoning. I agree. These are my 2 favorite buildings here in Brickell. I think this is called the SLS Lux Tower. Hey, DeLargo, thank you so much for your $25 donation. Very kind. This is best streams on earth. Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. And shout out to all of our viewers from Mexico. Good to see you guys. Thank you so much. Thomas says the return to the office is coming. I think I 50-50 agree with that. I don't think people are going to want to return. I want to return to the office, but who knows? Mybrid Farm says hello, good morning, good to see you. Joan K, welcome. Let me sort out the chat here. Apologize. Arsenal fans, this is crazy to think we were at 3% interest rates just last year. March 2022 versus 7.45% we're at today. This is Arsenal fan. So I'm assuming you're talking about mortgage rates, right? Now mortgage rates, I think you're right. I think according to bank rate, the last time I checked today, the average yield on a 30-year fixed was, I think, 7%. Now I think they're going higher. I think mortgage rates are gonna go higher. And I think that's gonna further depress sales transaction volume in the housing market. So hopefully, right, and I say hopefully because many people in the chat and many viewers are actually first-time home buyers, and we want to get them good deals. We want to get you guys good deals. We don't want you overpaying for real estate. So if history is a guide, right, generally speaking, you want to be buying real estate when yields are high, right? When interest rates are high, you actually want to be buying real estate. And when yields are low, if you choose to sell, right, that is usually when you get top dollar for your properties, because in theory it's more accessible to the masses, right? If there's $1 million property and you can get a 30-year fixed at 3%, well, technically, right, I'm using air quotes, that's going to be theoretically more accessible to larger amounts of people, as opposed to $1 million property at 7% 30-year fixed, or even 8 or 9%, which I think we're going to. So look, the narrative in the housing market today is that we're not seeing these very, very steep price declines because of the inventory issue, right? Again, going back to 14 years of ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, 85% of all the mortgages in the United States, these people have interest rates below 6%. So why would they ever want to sell their properties, or why would they ever want to refinance if they would have to go back into the marketplace with low inventory? And so it's a pretty good assumption. But in my opinion, we got some data out from Redfin. I think we got this data out a couple days ago. I'm not sure if you guys saw this or not, but according to Redfin, for the first time in a decade, the average, or I should say national home prices, so not state by state, but the national average, actually declined on a year-over-year basis. So we're starting to see rates really impact pricing, which I actually think is good news for the middle class, the lower class, and just people that are interested in purchasing property. So hopefully we'll see price declines across the board. I don't think it's going to be this cataclysmic 2008 style crash, but I think you're going to see valuations become more reasonable. Hey, Ford Brown says retired and don't miss 1 minute. Good to see you, Ford Brown, and God bless you. Steve CR says, Tom, do you think housing goes to 8%? I do, and now I'm more sure than ever. And again, I could be wrong, but after today, I think the big national rates are going to stay higher for longer. I'm more sure than ever that we'll probably see a 30-year fixed at 8% by the end of the year. That's my prediction. Hey, Julia M is here. Good to see you, Julia. Welcome to Miami. Good to see you. Frank Garcia says, Tom, do you think commercial real estate will be suppressed? Well, I think that commercial real estate is going to take a bigger hit than residential. And the reason why I think that is because of the big C, essentially what happened after the virus, right? There's tons of vacant space, commercial office space in major cities like New York City, Boston, San Francisco. And you're just starting to see a lot of defaults in that side of the business. And I think that's due to, number one, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I was going to say it's due to, number one, higher interest rates, but I actually don't think so. It's due to the change in which we work, right? I'm not going to go to the office and travel to the office 5 days a week. I'm only going to do that 2 days a week. And if I have to do that any more than that, I'm going to quit the job, right? And I'm not saying that's what I'm going to do. I'm saying that's what the majority of people are doing. If you look at the data, that's what the majority of people are doing. They're saying, if you want me in the office more than 2 days a week, I'm quitting the job and I'm doing something else. That's what the narrative is. So if I'm a big company, why in the heck would I ever lock myself into a 36 months lease, or even longer than that, on commercial office space if the vast majority of my employees are only coming into the office for 2 days? It's just not going to happen. And there's actually conclusive proof that companies right now are starting to take big hits to the balance sheet to break their leases, right? We saw this with Meta, right? Just go back, if you go to sec.gov, actually I'll make it easier for you. If you go to Meta Investor Relations, right, Facebook Investor Relations page, listen to the replay of the latest conference call. Mark Zuckerberg came on the conference call and said specifically that they are taking a higher than expected hit because they're starting to break their leases and downsize from their office space. Salesforce did the same thing. Mark Benioff said that on the earnings call. Jeff Bezos, well, not Jeff Bezos, he's no longer the CEO, but Amazon is doing the same thing. So if I had to make a prediction, I actually think that commercial is going to take a larger hit than residential real estate, in my view. 3T3 says, Tom, most of the 70s and 80s had interest rates between 8 and 12%. 3T3, you are 100% correct, and that's why, as we said earlier in the live stream, I think we're actually going back to normal. A lot of people say, oh, this is so abnormal, this is a crazy market, but rates aren't supposed to be zero. Rates are supposed to be normalized. Jeff277 says, Tom, I predict Google makes a doozy of a write-down for office spaces. I would agree. I would have to agree with you too. The LT Prod says, I see more companies building new next to empty spaces. Maybe, I guess you can consider that a flight to quality, perhaps. And I think the best example of this, guys, and we saw this in real time in New York City as it relates to the Hudson Yards. KPMG, big consulting firm, funny enough, it's right there. They used to have their main headquarters on the east side of Manhattan. They dumped that office space to move into a state-of-the-art Class A. So again, in order to persuade your employees to come back to the office, there's no way somebody is going to commute 2 hours to the city to sit in a dusty cubicle. It's just not real. It's not going to happen. So companies are probably going to have a massive flight to quality where commercial space is smaller in square footage, but it's going to be absolutely gorgeous. I don't know, maybe that will happen. Who knows? Hey, Julia M says, Tom, what is the real weather forecast for Miami Beach for the next week or so? That's a good question. Now, I've been here for about 2 weeks, I think, and almost every day it's been 75 to 84 degrees, give or take, in that temperature range. Usually at night it's like 74 degrees. During the day, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it gets to a high of 84 degrees, and it's been sunny every single day. It hasn't rained once. So if I had to guess, I think it's probably going to be the same thing. Our rainy season is not for another couple months. So if you're thinking about coming to Miami, it should be pretty dry. At least until May, it should be pretty dry. Usually the summer is our rainy season. Right now is actually pretty moderate, pretty nice. Hey, Jay Frost says, downtown Miami looks jumping for a Tuesday. Good to see you, Jay. Jay, I would agree. I think it's also because of the spring break, right? So March, I think, is really popular for a lot of college students, spring breakers, to come down and enjoy, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. So I've noticed that too. I've noticed a lot of spring breakers here. Let's walk a little bit down this way. This is Southwest 11th Street. Hey, Julia M says, Tom, every time I go to Florida, it rains the week I want to come. Oh my God. Well, I will say this. During our rainy season, at least for the time that I've been here, it doesn't really rain all day though. What happens is it'll be really nice in the morning, and then right around 3 o'clock to maybe 6 o'clock, it's almost as if you're in like a crazy hurricane. It rains so much, and then it stops again. So there's only like 2 to 3 hours a day where it rains, and then it stops. So I think you'll be fine. William says, when you walk in New York, you see some beautiful churches. I don't see any churches when you walk in Miami. Don't they worship in Miami? I don't know. Do not know. Well, the churches are also, they look different down here, right? So the churches, the majority of them, at least in my community of North Miami Beach, they don't look like the churches that you see in New York, like St. Thomas Church or anything like that. They're almost just like these big concrete blocks. And I think they have to be like that because we get hurricanes down here. But there's a really gorgeous looking church right down here on Brickell Avenue that looks like a normal sized church, but a lot of the places of worship here, they don't look like the stereotypical normal church that you would see in New York, I guess. Dima says, hey Tom, do you recommend Brickell if you're thinking of moving to Miami and you're in your 20s? So I definitely would. However, I think it also depends on your budget and how much money you make, because it is very, very expensive down here. You know, in parts of Brickell, especially near Mary Brickell Village and Brickell City Center where we just were, if you look at all these ultra luxury high rises we have right here, you know, you're talking about rents very, very similar to that of Manhattan, New York City, which actually didn't used to be like that, by the way. It really only started getting crazy expensive during the onset of the pandemic, right? Because of the crazy migration here. But if you're into partying, if you're into going out, if you want to hang out with friends, I would say Brickell is fantastic, but you're going to have to pay a premium for that, right? If you want something a little bit more quiet and you want some land, I would move to where I live, which is the North Miami Beach region and area of Miami. And one of the real reasons that specific location is for a couple reasons. What I'm seeing in Miami now, because before, let's talk about pre-financial crisis, right? If you want to talk about leading up to the financial crisis, and this is going to get me in trouble with a lot of Miamians, but look, I'm just telling you what I see. A lot of the people who would buy down here prior to the big tech boom we have now was a lot of speculators and people buying second and third homes and a lot of retirees. What is different this time that I'm seeing, right, and that drew me to Miami, is that we're starting to get like real high-paying, very good, I like to call them coastal jobs, valley, like you would get in New York, you would get in Boston. You're starting to see that a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot, come down here to Miami. So the reason why I bought single family, multifamily, in terms of like a duplex, triplex, that is what I want to accumulate down here, is because when people move down here and commute into the city to work at Citadel Securities, to work at Goldman Sachs, to work in, you know, all these big tech companies that are coming down here, they're going to start to raise families here, and that means they're going to want space. So the way I envision Southern Florida is sort of the way I envision Long Island and the New York metropolitan area. So if you think about downtown Miami and Brickell, you could think about Manhattan and Queens. If you think about Surfside, Bal Harbor, and North Miami Beach, you could think about Nassau and Suffolk County. So a lot of people, my bet anyway, is that a lot of people that move here to get good paying jobs and then start families are going to commute via the train or via the bus or by a car or whatever to downtown Miami and Brickell, and they're going to start families and live in places like North Miami Beach and North Miami, where there's a lot of land. So that is sort of where I'm putting my money to work. But if you're young and you just want to rent someplace that has an awesome view and you're going to party all day, Brickell is fantastic, but you're going to pay a pretty penny, in my view. Yeah, Jonathan France has loved the Wynwood area. Wynwood is definitely, you know, I do like Wynwood, but I think Wynwood is a little bit overpriced right now. I think Wynwood is going through a little bit of a boom-bust cycle, in my opinion. What I try to do is look for a neighborhood that's not yet fashionable, but is becoming fashionable in a way. And here's the way that I try to look at these properties. Go to a neighborhood, right, in and around where you live. It doesn't matter where you live. And if you notice that you see a lot of properties that are old homes, you know, probably the person that owned it back in the 50s still lives there. But then every other house on the block, well, I should say maybe every other fifth home on the block is sold and is under construction, and they're building these huge monstrosities. Because chances are the people who acquire these 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes in Miami are going to pay 400 grand for them. They're going to pay, you know, maybe 395, 370 to 400 grand. They're just doing that so they could demolish it and build their own properties, right? And when you build these really gorgeous, you know, 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom homes, it really, really raises and elevates the property values everywhere else. A very good example of this would be Normandy Shores. Now, I told you guys I was looking to buy a property 2015 on Normandy Shores, or you can call it Normandy Isles. And exactly what I just described is going on there right now. And it was going on there when I was looking to buy back in 2015. Now you can't get anything on that island for, I don't know, less than $850,000. If you look at the northernmost side of Normandy Shores, you know, people are buying these homes that were built in the 50s, right? 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. They're totally tearing them down and they're building these ultra luxurious mega mansions there. So, I don't know, that's what I look for if you're a real estate investor. Don't buy the top of the market, don't buy the bottom of the market, so don't buy in like the ghetto. Buy in a neighborhood where it's just like, you're not the first person there. You want to be like the second or the third person that's really going to come in there and make the neighborhood nice. Here we have the Metro Mover. I think this is the Financial District Station. Let's see what the name of it is. I think it's called Financial District Station. Dan Zhang says, Tom, what are your thoughts on the Nevada real estate market? In my view, I would never buy there. But again, I wouldn't buy there because I would never live there. I couldn't do the desert. I can't do the dry. And I think it's a little bit too secluded in my view. I don't know. Dusty Cole says, I actually appreciate mid-century 1980s homes. Yeah, my home was built in 1950. My home is extremely old. Oh, team, we've already been streamed for over an hour. Let's head back. I'll give you guys a shot of the SLS Lux Tower. But if you are enjoying the live stream so far tonight, feel free to leave a like on the video. Click the subscribe button if you're new. Share the show with your friends. We do these live streams about 5 days a week between New York City and Miami. Oh, look at this. This looks like brand new developments here. Bespoke 1 to 4 bedroom residences. Now, you guys always crucify me because I pronounce this wrong. How do you pronounce it? Cipriani, I think? I never knew that they were going to build actual residences here. Think about how cool that is going to be. So you have the SLS Lux Tower right here. And then the Cipriani, is it pronounced? I don't know, you guys are gonna grill me in the comments. I'm not a big bougie guy, if you could tell, but that's gonna be cool. That's gonna be cool. We'll be able to watch the groundbreaking, I should say the construction live on the stream here. All right, let's cross and then head over. Hey, Arsenal fan 13 says, Tom, what are your thoughts on Broward County? I really like Broward County. Thank you so much for your donation. But I don't like it for me personally because it's a little bit too far away from Miami. Now, I live and work in, well, I don't live in downtown Miami, but I work in downtown Miami, so it's just too far for me. And plus, I don't drive a car. If you live in Broward, you really, really need a car. And as you guys know, I do not like driving at all. I don't have a car, I don't own a car, I don't want to own a car. And it's just a little bit too far out of my way, I think. So, I don't know, anybody here lives in Broward, maybe could provide some more insight, but for me, not big of a... Donald Darko, you're right. Cipriani. Al Baker says, Tom used the bright line. We'll have to do that one night. Now this is the Panorama Tower, excuse me. This is the tallest residential apartment building in Miami. But this will soon be dethroned by the Waldorf Astoria residences that are going to be going up in downtown Miami pretty soon. I'm very excited about that. Keith says, but you want a Tesla? Yeah, I think if it ever came time for me to get a car, it would be a Tesla. But, I mean, ever since I got the scooter, there's just really no reason for me to have a car. I don't have a family, I don't have kids. And I can't stand, if you guys want to know the real reason why I don't have a car, I'll tell you. It's more of a psychological thing. Like, my brain gets all crazy. I cannot stand, and I'm serious about this, I cannot stand having a liability on my mindset, right? So let's say if I'm driving around and I park it somewhere, I don't want to worry about getting a ticket. I don't want to worry about someone scratching the car or backing into it, because then I got to make an insurance claim, and that's going to take some time, and then I got to be on the phone with the insurance company. I just can't do it. I can't do it. And I think being from New York has conditioned me to be that way, right? If I want to go to work, I jump on the Long Island Railroad and I go to Penn Station and I walk to work, right? I don't even have to think about it, right? But if I have a car, I have to think about so many different things. I have to think about the liability. I have to think about getting tickets. I just don't want to think about that stuff. Yeah, Yogi says in LA the car might, oh my God, the car might get lit on fire. What? Talking about like the riots or something? Protests? Matthew M says parking alone is a reason not to own in cities. That's true. All right, well, Manhattan, you know, in some locations, if you want to park your car in a parking garage, it's not uncommon to pay well over $400 a month to park your car in a garage, especially if you live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan or something like that. So it's expensive, man. Now, speaking of cars, I was flipping through the channels today, and I'm come across CNBC. OEM analysts on, and he was talking about specifically General Motors, but as the conversation went on, he said for the first time in history, the average car note or payment is over $800. So the average American who's buying a car is paying $800 a month to own the car. Now, obviously, we went through the entire live stream talking about interest rates. That's probably a major point. Yeah. I just can't even fathom that. You pay $800 a month for a vehicle. You know, back in the day, guys, you know, that wasn't uncommon to have your mortgage payment be $800, right? Depending on where you lived. You know, my parents, I think our mortgage when I was growing up was probably $900. Now, I'm not saying that's cheap and that's nothing to sneeze at, but it seems as if with inflation, the cost of a vehicle now is almost the cost of home ownership back in the day, which is really, really crazy. Nako says, let's not even talk about the insurance. Yeah, and then you got to pay the insurance, and then you got to pay, you know, to maintenance the car. Everything's expensive, man. Everything is crazy expensive. I honestly don't even know how people keep up. 3 grams is exactly that. You know, I think my first apartment in Manhattan, well, you can't call it an apartment, that's not fair. My first real apartment where I rented a room, I think it was $850, and I lived in Harlem on 127th Street. So if you can imagine, I'll try to give a descriptive picture. Right as you get off the train, okay, on 125, there's the Whole Foods right there. That's where I get off, and I just walk a couple blocks up. I was the first brownstone on the right. That was my first real apartment, but I only rented a room. I only had a room. I didn't even have my own place. But then again, $850. Some people are spending that just to have a car. I can't even imagine that now, man. Matthew M says, you're right, Tom. How are people keeping up? It blows my mind. It's crazy. It's gotten out of hand, man. It's wild. Now, another thing is, if we go all the way back to what we were talking about with the Fed chair, right? And Elizabeth Warren grilling him and saying how Fed Chair Jerome Powell is the worst person and he's going to throw 2 million people out of work and how he doesn't have a soul and he doesn't, you know, care about the working American. Well, I mean, he wants to get inflation under control. I mean, do you want to keep paying $800 for your car note? I mean, do you want to pay $3,000 a month just to live in a decent place? I mean, some people are paying $3 grand a month just so they can raise their kids in a nice enough apartment that doesn't have rats crawling all over the place, right? So if you put it in perspective, inflation is a big problem, right? And I don't think it's not all Joe Biden's fault. It's not the Democrats' fault. It's not the Republicans' fault. I think they all share in the blame, but you got to get inflation under control or you're going to have a societal break. Not to be too doom and gloom. I always try to keep it very positive, but I think we are going to get inflation under control, but you got to let the Fed do its job. And if that means people need to be thrown out of work, if that means you need to have, you know, a severe earnings recession for a lot of these companies and the stock market needs to go lower, then I think that's what needs to be done because, you know, if you make a household income of $75,000, right? In most places, and I'm talking about big metropolitan areas, I understand, you know, in some smaller cities you could live just fine, and I get that. I'm totally sensitive to that. I'm talking about major metropolitan areas like New York, like Miami, Denver. That is just getting by, right? So unless we want life to continue like that, you really got to get serious about getting inflation under control. Jay says, I think I spend $2,000 a month just on weed. Jeff W277 says, I'm a proud progressive liberal, but Elizabeth Warren sounded stupid today. We have a 3.4% unemployment rate. That's true, I guess, to put things in perspective, right? So even if unemployment does go to 5%, on a historical standard, that's still pretty low. But we all know that the unemployment rate is just a totally meaningless statistic now. What we should really be looking at is the labor force participation rate, because if you look at the labor force participation rate, it's not as a rosy picture as the unemployment rate would paint it out to be. It's actually quite a catastrophe. Hey, Mighty Mole, good to see you. Hang with Mark Zoops, I know many in Denver and rents are through the roof. Yeah, I was actually going to move to Denver. That was my top 2 choice. It was between Miami and Denver. At the time, I was interviewing with a cybersecurity company, which we talk about a lot. It's a private company now. It was taken private by... Who was it taken private by? I wanted to say Vista Equity Partners, but that's not true. I think Thoma Bravo. Thoma Bravo, Orlando Bravo's company, took it private, I think. Ping Identity. Yeah, so Vista Equity Partners took it public, and Thoma Bravo took it private. Sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, it's a Denver-based cybersecurity company. And Denver, just like Miami, is a very, very up-and-coming city for technology jobs. Denver's a great town. But with that came a huge mass migration to Denver, and it pushed property values to insane levels, and it also pushed rents to insane levels as well. Yeah, I mean, you're right. But the good news is I think rents are going to come down, and I think property valuations are going to come down. I really do. Hang with Mark says, yep, friends of ours are in cybersecurity in Denver. Good thing you didn't move out there. Now, the only reason I didn't is because it's too far away from New York. And I need to be back and forth between New York and wherever I'm going to be. Now, for me to get door to door, I don't want to be too conservative here. It's about 5-hour trip. Right, if I need to make a meeting in Manhattan and I get a 7 o'clock flight out of Fort Lauderdale or out of Miami, if it takes off at 7, I could probably be on time for an 11:30 meeting, which is good. Denver, you can't say the same thing, and it's not by the water, obviously. It's just too far away. That's one of the only reasons why I didn't move there. But great town. I have nothing but great things to say about Denver. All right, this is Southeast 9th Street, outside of the Chipotle, ticker symbol CMG. Hey, Jay Frost says, I love Denver. The cost is going way up, though. Frank Garcia says, Tom, is it true for every 1% increase in unemployment, there are 40,000 deaths? I think I saw something like that, but I don't really know how you would magnify that. So I don't know if that's just one of those hyperbolic statistics or if it's real. But I have heard that, but if you really think about it, like, how would you quantify that? I don't know. Diane, welcome. Says, my friend sat on a cactus. Okay. Traveling Bees says, Tom, there's something called As Teams meeting. Microsoft Teams, yeah. Sometimes you need to be in person. Hey, Kevin Ramsey, good to see you, my friend. Welcome. Mighty Mole. Mighty Mole, from your comments, I think I may buy a property in Denver this year just because you put that comment. Williams says, Fed should lower its inflation aim to 2% to 1%. At today's higher basis from which inflation is figured, too many dollars have to be generated to maintain 2%. Now, I actually think if they were going to readjust their target, they would probably readjust it higher, if anything, than lower. Did anybody see Janet Yellen? Janet Yellen did an interview a couple weeks, it may have been a couple months ago, but I think it aired a couple weeks ago. And she was going on this whole tangent about how 3 to 4% inflation is actually, it should be the new normal and we should normalize that. I couldn't disagree more with that. Her reasoning for that was because we live in a new economy with super fast growing and ultra high growth, tech companies, and we live in a faster economy, she was describing it as. So she said we should probably normalize 3 to 4% inflation. I think that's just a coping mechanism. I don't think that's based in reality. I mean, maybe it's easy for her to say. All of these people that are virtue signaling to us, are multi-millionaires, if not deca-millionaires. So I think she could survive the 4 to 5% inflation. Well, if you actually calculate, though, to be fair, inflation, how we used to calculate it back in the 80s, our inflation rate is probably almost at 9% today. Magnolia says, Tom, I don't know when Denver was affordable. My grandparents owned a brick German-style garden. And 20 years ago, German-style home near the Botanical Garden. And the list price, we're asking $750. Wow. Wow. All right, so we're going to cross back over into downtown Miami. I do have a quick announcement. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing some business travel, so we will not have a live stream tomorrow, but we will be back on Thursday. But just tomorrow, I'm going to be traveling the majority of the day, so I do apologize for that. So there's going to be a quick, brief hiatus, but then we will be right back on track on Thursday. Let me cross here so we could get over the bridge a little bit faster. Now, Lucid Motors, they're public via SPAC. I think they reported earnings 2 weeks ago. They've reported really, really horrible earnings. Magnolia says, what do you think of Lucid being bought by a Saudi buyer? I think it makes sense. And the reason why I say that is because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been very vocal about diversifying their economy away from oil. Now, rumor has it that some of the members of the royal family, or some of the royal families there, are actually worth trillions. Has anybody heard that? So not just billions, but they're worth trillions. And I guess one of the reasons for that is because they don't legally have to report their net worth because they are royalty, something like that. But anyway, I think it makes sense. I don't think it's a good, well, maybe I shouldn't say it's not a good investment, but the royal family is really looking to diversify away from oil and gas because their economy is so dependent on it. Oh yeah, Al Baker, you're right. CrowdStrike, speaking of cybersecurity, CrowdStrike did report earnings today too. Hawaii says, I believe it. TPAC 5000 says they are. Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. I would probably say it is true, but it's not reported on paper. It's not verifiable. But some people say that they are. And I think just since they are a royal family, like a kingdom, they don't have to publicly report their net worth or something like that. Now, it's interesting because you guys, I would say the top 3 leaders in cybersecurity, in my view. Number 1, Palo Alto Networks by a long shot. Maybe a little later on in the week, we'll redo the stream where we talked about cybersecurity architecture. So, the history of a cybersecurity architecture, all the way going back to the years of a sort of a hub and spoke networks, and then you have castle and moat to protect the basic hub and spoke. Now that you have cloud computing and public clouds, you increasingly need zero trust architecture. So maybe we'll review that. But Palo Alto is the leader. PANW is the ticker there. Then I would say the top 2 after that are Zscaler and CrowdStrike. So both reported really good quarters. Now, why would we think that cybersecurity in general, not necessarily in the valuation of the stock price, but in revenue growth, is holding up a little bit more than, say, other SaaS companies? Well, it has to do with nice to haves and must haves, right? So when everything is good and the economy is going well and everybody's making a ton of money, companies tend to take on a lot more than they really should in terms of SaaS spending. So they buy all of this, software as a service products, some of which they really don't need. And in times of economic stress and contraction, usually what happens, if anybody's worked at a tech company or worked at any company, the first thing to go, right, the first fat to trim is all of this unnecessary software, right? So if I'm a chief technology officer at a company and we're bleeding cash, we're losing a lot of customers, the first thing and the easiest thing to do is to say, give me a list of all of the software vendors we have, okay? Whether that be CRMs, lead generation tools, cybersecurity, whatever, right? SD-WAN vendors. Give me a list of that, and we're gonna cut and cancel all of these SaaS contracts of things we don't need in order to sort of stop the bleeding. You can't really cut spending in cybersecurity. You can't really do that because, for obvious reasons. A cyber attack could literally mean the difference between having a running and sustainable business or bankruptcy, right? If you get compromised by some sort of phishing scam or emotet attack, and your whole system is locked down and compromised, and the ransom is 20 million, and if you don't pay the 20 million, you're not getting your systems unlocked, well, then you have a big problem, right? You could literally go out of business. So SaaS contracts will be cut in accordance to its priority. And my bet has been that cybersecurity spend will actually continue to accelerate, right? And this is in contrast to a lot of analysts out there. I've actually read a lot of analyst reports saying that they're going to start to see revenue contraction at some of these cybersecurity companies. I actually think the exact opposite. Because think about it like this. Let's say if you could save $2 million a year, and this is average reoccurring revenue, right? A lot of SaaS contracts run on ARR, so annual reoccurring revenue. If you can save $2 million a year on canceling some licenses of your CRM, to then spend an additional $500,000 to really reinforce your infrastructure, you're saving net 1.5 million, but you're also giving these other cybersecurity companies an additional 500,000 to really fortify your network, fortify your infrastructure. I think that's going to happen. I think that's going to happen. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? I think we got to end it. My phone is going to die. Yeah, Jeff W277, so Citrix Systems has an HQ in Fort Lauderdale. Also kind of cybersecurity. I think Fortinet is thinking about opening an office down here too. Speaking of the church, there it is right there. This kind of looks like a traditional church. All right, but team, we do have to end it. Again, tomorrow we're not going to be live. I'm doing some traveling. But then on Thursday we will be back. I think we covered a lot today. We covered a lot. Apologize I didn't turn the slow-mo on in the chat. But we talked a lot about interest rates. We talked a lot about the Federal Reserve. Yeah, we covered a lot. I think we covered our bases here today. So I want to wish everybody a very happy Tuesday. It's already the middle of the week tomorrow. Wishing you guys a very prosperous, healthy, and happy Wednesday. And we'll see you all on Thursday. If you enjoyed the stream, feel free to leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Share the show with your friends. And I'll see you guys right back here on Thursday. So hang with Mark. Thank you so much. Joan K, appreciate you. Arsenal fan 13. Appreciate you as always. Richard Vogel, J Frost, Steph UH, the LT Prod, Unij 23, appreciate you. Gary Carpenter, Hawaii, Sunshine After Rain, Keith, Wayne McKay, thank you. Joe Driver, Deep Value. Alex, B. Smith, Magnolia Bell, appreciate it. August Ice, Mike C, GG NYC, Abdullah, photos from around New York. And to the Mighty Bull, have a good night wherever you are, because there is always a bull market somewhere. You just need to know where to look. See you guys on Thursday. Take care.